Hi, Angie. I
Hi,
just sent everybody links again. I don't know where they vanished to here.
Reg, I'm so upset. I failed by 2 points.
Here's Ed. Good afternoon.
Hi, Ed.
Eleanor is just wrapping up a meeting here. Hi, Janice. I think we have you have your mute on there, but assuming it's working here.
Hi.
Yep, you're there. Eleanor just said she was just a tad late in coming here.
Penny just walked in the door, so she'll be on in a minute.
Okay, great. Here's Eleanor. Wow, look at that nice view you have in your office.
Yeah.
Wow,
I do have a nice view. You can
that's
see.
nice. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Is that Logan Airport behind you there?
Mhm. Yeah. And the
Very
custom house tower.
fancy here.
That's awesome.
I think I'm going to
Hi,
have to.
everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Janice.
Hello.
We're
Thank
just
you
waiting
Angie,
on
today for
Penny.
getting I'm sorry, Reg.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank Angie today. She knows I've been a pain about the ice but it's really scary to me, but the guys did a great job and I just want to say thanks.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, maybe we'll ask Cheryl to include that in the beginning of the minutes when we get going officially here for what is hopefully a pretty short meeting here. Here's Penny. And we have 3 attendees with us tonight: Kalpana, Richard Day, and Ross Donald. Just for the record, for Cheryl Gosman in the minutes. Penny, if we can do a sound check, we can get going here.
Hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Sorry, I was at the hospital with somebody who got delayed.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, well, let me order the special board meeting of the Needham Housing Authority and call the roll. Chair Reg Foster here.
Eleanor Evans here.
Ed Scheidler here.
Penny Kirk here.
Janice Bennett here.
So we have a quorum. We have a very short agenda tonight, hopefully. And that is the payment of a $6,323.08 check to Driscoll and Driscoll PC for services rendered between 12/21/2021 and 1/19/2022. And by the way, there are no chairman's announcements here. What happened is that Ed Scheidler and Penny Kirk were on Friday, the ones designated to be signing the checks for the in-between warrant in our new, twice a month check issuing procedure, and it was forwarded to you. They decided, and Ed sent out an email on the subject on the 29th to write void and do not pay without a board approval on those checks. And so I think the best way to proceed is maybe, we can tee up the resolution first, or we can discuss it first, whichever. Maybe we should tee up the resolution first. Then Ed, I'm just going to turn the floor over to you and Penny to, sort of discuss or why you took that action. So I move to approve the payment of the $6,323.08 invoice from Driscoll and Driscoll PC. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Eleanor. Okay. So Ed, over to you and Penny after Ed here.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for your compliment. I had no idea that you regarded my influence such that you hired two gunslingers for the ambush at the OK Corral. Secondly, I'm not saying we shouldn't pay them at all. I only want to hold back the 1392 portion from the Zoom meeting.
And for what reason?
Well, you went past your authority to hire two attorneys for a supposed legal session without board authority. If you had asked to have them join the meeting as legal counsel to discuss the pros and cons of the motions, we most likely would have agreed. But your authority as chairman is to run a meeting. There's no special authority given to you beyond what is given to all commissioners. Do I understand that what you are actually saying is that as a commissioner, I could bring in legal counsel as a guest without board permission and expect them to be paid?
Well, actually, the board authorized it in our November meeting, so that's really the
They
question.
didn't authorize that, no.
Yes, they did.
I
I don't want to argue with you. I just want you lay out your reasons. I understand that you don't
Okay.
agree with me, okay?
Well, it was certainly not your purpose to have a discussion of pros and cons regarding the motions, but your real purpose was to shut down the motions by creating fear of personal liability for discharging an outside contractor. Now, Angie is quoted in the minutes of the budget meeting as saying that the person that is currently running the after-school program and has been a contractor for years.
That's just sort of out of
No,
order.
it's not.
We're just trying to decide whether to pay this or not.
No, okay, well,
and
I'm
you
trying to
say
give
it's
you
an
the.
illegitimate payment here.
You
It's not
asked
here
you
to talk
asked me for
about
reasons.
the
You asked me for
after-school
reasons. I'm trying
program
to give
again.
you.
So,
Okay.
So,
All right, so anyway, the Driscolls achieved their mission in creating fear and having an outside contractor without a contract is going to sue any of us is pure foolishness. All right, Jonathan was brought in to correct the mistake he made when he said that the original motion to change the personnel policy that I made was to give the authority to hire and fire to the board. Now, he obviously didn't read the motion because the last sentence in the motion was to delegate that responsibility to the executive director. I've had two run-ins with Jonathan, one when I was an advocate for a resident, and I was asking Angie to change a decision that she had made. And Jonathan went on and on and on in a long-winded I don't know what to describe it as, talking about the responsibilities of tenants and the administration, and they're working together, and this thing went on and on and on. When he got all finished, I said to him, that was nice, but has nothing to do with what we're here for. So he's 2 for 2 in meeting the reason why he was brought into the discussion. He's missed both of them. And Jeff was quoted in the December minutes as saying, even though he was not attending tonight as a legal capacity or in a legal capacity, if he was there as a guest, why should we be paying him as an attorney? So Jonathan was brought in to correct the mistake that he made on my motion in his interpretation of it. And Jeff was brought in as a guest, not as in a legal capacity. So why should we pay them? Jonathan was paid for his mistake the first time around. We certainly shouldn't be paying him the second time around for correcting it. And
Okay,
it should have been
anything
brought
else?
to the board for permission for authority for that. And it wasn't.
Isn't anything else?
No, not for the moment.
All right. Penny, I assume you joined Ed in taking this action. Do you have anything you want to add or?
Well, I think it's pretty thorough. I think it's pretty clear that there have been some mistakes made. 2 by Jonathan. And I'm not sure whether it was a mistake, Reg, but I'm not aware that the whole board agreed to have the Driscolls come as lawyers to advise us. They were introduced as guests. And certainly Jeff made it clear that he was not there as legal counsel. So it's a great big bill, but we're talking about $1,392 not being paid for that meeting, which was, in my opinion, beating up on the board and scaring everybody. Certainly scared me. That's all I've got to add.
Okay. Janice, do you want to go next? Do you have any comments?
Well, what I want to contribute to is, yeah, I sat through that evening, and who do they think they are, trying to intimidate people? I wasn't intimidated, but because they don't have, I don't have anything they can sue me for. So, but if I did, I probably would have felt intimidated, and it's a shame that Penny changed her vote because of that.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, Eleanor, you're next, I guess.
So at the November board meeting, we as a board did decide to have Jonathan Driscoll come and clarify his memo with regard to the motion that Ed had made about regarding the relationship between the board and the executive director. I mean, I don't think we said, and it seemed to me that he did clarify that. And I actually think that, you know, in that what he and Jeff said during the meeting was helpful. And I felt like I learned some things from that, and that they were not stating anything that is at all outside the ordinary of, you know, what are the expectations and, you know, the role of the board and management in running a housing authority or any other organization. And I think that it's a dangerous precedent for us to start slicing and dicing, you know, what bills the housing authority is going to pay to its vendors who have already performed services. And, you know, it is not, and it is a detriment to the housing authority to not pay bills for services that have already been performed, and, you know, whether it be by legal counsel with which we have a longstanding relationship, and of which there are not many legal, you know, attorneys who are familiar with the ins and outs of DHCD and HUD requirements that apply to housing authorities. And I could imagine that if we had any other legal counsel who was familiar with that, that they would have told us the same thing that the Driscolls told us. And then in terms of just vendors generally, if we get in the practice of not paying our vendors for services that rendered, then we're going to soon wind up in a situation where we have vendors who will not provide services to us at all.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Ed, whenever everybody has a chance to talk. Anything else, Eleanor, that you want to comment on here?
No, not just yet.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Ed.
I would have to ask the question, was the two of them appearing authorized by the board?
Whose question is that to direct it to?
To anybody that wants to answer it, I guess maybe to you.
Angie and I
Eleanor
did-
just said that Jonathan was invited back. Jeff was not invited. And I'm saying that Jeff came back to correct the mistake that he made, and Jonathan came back to correct the mistake he made that he had already been paid for. And Jeff said he wasn't there for legal, to represent a legal position.
we got that point down for the record here. Yeah, no, Angie and I decided to invite Jeff Driscoll because the issues that were before us, there were 8 motions altogether, were partly legal issues and partly best practices issues. And as I identified in advance of the meeting and during the beginning of the meeting, Jeff Driscoll was invited to address the best practices issues, and Jonathan was invited to address the legal issues. And in fact, that's how the meeting proceeded all the way through the December 16th meeting. But yes, I and Angie made that decision.
All right,
So any other comments?
go ahead, Eleanor.
And I just would note that it's, I mean, just because the term guest may have been used at the beginning of the meeting, that is not dispositive. Anytime somebody who's not a member of the board is speaking to the board or on the panel, so to speak, it's common to call them guests, even, like the auditor was on last month and was introduced as a guest.
Okay.
Was the expense approved?
So,
No, it was not approved.
and can you be clear in your question? The expense of the auditor? Yes, the auditor was
No.
invited to come to the meeting to express
No.
interest of the
We're
board.
talking about the Driscolls in the Zoom meeting.
And the Driscolls were invited in the November meeting to come to the board as well.
One Driscoll was invited, not two, and he wasn't invited to come back and discuss all of the other motions. He was invited to come back and address his mistake.
Well, I believe that's a little bit of splitting of hairs. Go ahead, Eleanor.
I mean, also, it was not my perception when he was invited back that he was invited back to necessarily address his mistake per se, but rather to address, perhaps provide more context for his memo, but also to advise generally on that motion.
So,
Anyway, so
any other comments, that have already been made here? I mean, we're just going to vote on this check sooner or later here. So, any other comments or new comments?
let's clarify what we're voting on. Are we clarifying on, there was $4,931.08 that I said in my email should be paid. And I am asking that $1,392 not be paid until there's a board vote. So let's be very clear.
My motion very clearly states to pay the entire invoice. That's what it
Okay.
says. The entire, do you want me to read it again?
No, if you're saying it's for the entire invoice, I understand
Just to
exactly.
repeat it, is to approve the payment of $6,323.08 to Driscoll and Driscoll PC, which is the entire invoice, if I wasn't clear before.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments from anybody? So I want to address some of the allegations you made in my direction, Ed, first, and then I want to ask some questions, and then I want to make a statement. Okay. First of all, you said, and I quote, that I set out to ambush you, and I absolutely did not set out to do that. I set out to have, authoritative experts there to help the board with its decision-making process. I do agree that yeah, we spoke of inviting Jonathan Driscoll as well. And I do agree that when I went over what we were going to be addressing, I extended it to the entire agenda that we spent almost 3+ hours going through 3 of your motions. And I did that because I thought that was the right thing to do, along with Angie, because it would help us with our decision-making process, okay? And I still think that was a good idea to do. And I disagree that I or Angie need board authority to make that sort of decision. But I will go on to say that I totally, explicitly disagree with your characterization of their participation and the advice they participated to, provided us during the participation for almost 3+ hours as pure foolishness. I reject that categorically. I think that's, I'm totally think that's not the right thing to say here, and it isn't what happened if you actually read the minutes or listen to the recording of the meeting. Also, I don't think it's correct to characterize that it was invited purely for the purposes of correcting his error in the 4 or 5 page email he submitted in for our benefit for the November meeting at which we did invite him. He was invited to clarify what he was trying to say and how it applied to the particular motion that you had first teed up in the October meeting, and then was carried over to the November meeting, and then decided to bring in expertise for the December meeting. And I don't think he made an error whatsoever. When you actually listen to the entire recording of the December 16th meeting, as I have had, and you listen to the dialogue and the debate that was conducted over that motion and also over the 2 other motions. Most of the time was about 2/3, 60-70% of the time was taken during those 3+ hours in a very constructive dialogue and discussion between you and either one or the other, the legal counsel Driscoll or the best practices Driscoll. I agree with what Eleanor said as guest. I think that's completely, twisting the informal use of that term as it's been used during the time you've been on the board and for the years before that. Everybody's characterized as a guest. And absolutely, if you are under the impression all this time that when Rick Shaw attends our board meetings, for example, for the budget, and I characterize him as a guest, our fee accountant, and you think he's just doing that out of the goodness of his heart on a pro bono basis, that isn't true. Just as another example to the one that Eleanor provided. And that's true for any professional, except for those 5 board members. Us 5 board members are attending without compensation. But the other professionals that attend our board meeting, like say Cambridge Housing Authority attends our board meeting to give an update on what's going on with the Modernization and Redevelopment Authority. Guess what? Those individuals who attend are getting paid. And I actually totally reject what you said. It's never been the practice of this board or any board I've been on when the executive director or the CEO and the board chair decide to bring people for constructive purposes, experts and professionals. It's not subject to board decision. You can not re-elect the chair if you don't think the chair is making good decisions. You can eventually, I guess, terminate or not renew the employment contract of the executive director. But no, the board does not on an individual basis make those kind of decisions, and never has, not only in this board, but in any board I've been part of for 30 years. And, you know, I would just, again, to Penny, who was endorsing these comments that you made, but also added that it was for the sole purpose of beating up the board, and to Janice, who said it was for the purpose of intimidating board. That is really not true. If you felt concerned after you listened to those people, that wasn't because anybody was trying to be manipulative. That was for the purpose of your own education as relatively new board members who have never been on a board before, as to my knowledge anyway. So it's not a manipulative thing. It's really an educational thing, which apparently didn't work. So those are my comments on your comments here. Moving along here.
May I
No, I'm going to finish, and then you certainly have a chance to talk. Okay. Moving right along. So, you know, I know that I put on the agenda that was distributed you the Friday before, on the 10th of December, that both Jonathan Driscoll and Jeff Driscoll were going to be there. That is on the agenda that you received it with your board packet. I do not believe I heard any objections or concerns raised by you or Penny or Janice to that. And as you know, our board practice, which we've recently clarified, is if you had any concerns, you would raise them before the following Tuesday. So if there had to be an adjustment, that adjustment could be made in time, so that adjustment could be part of the maybe amended and posted agenda for the December 16th meeting. That is our procedure. And so I really think it's a little bit disingenuous of you to say that you didn't know that was coming. You certainly was on those minutes, maybe, I'm sorry, on the agenda, maybe you didn't notice. Secondly, when I introduced the two Driscolls at the beginning of the board member, and, you know, yes, I said they're our guests because, you know, that's the way we always do it for all the professionals that have ever attended our board meeting, you know, and being paid. You know, I, at the beginning of that particular session, and I'm just reading from the minutes here, but, you know, certainly everybody can look to the recording if they want to look at actually what was said. You know, I said, I outlined the process that we would be, you know, following for all the motions, not just for the first motion. And I said that I would call, you know, ask Jonathan Driscoll, I would ask the proponent first to present the motion. Most of those motions were from you. Some of them that we didn't reach because we only got through three, the entire 3.5 hours were from Penny. You know, the proponent would present the motion. Then I would ask for a legal comment from our general counsel, Jonathan Driscoll, from a legal point of view, and followed by Jeff Driscoll's comments from a board best practices point of view. And then next in turn, each of the commissioners would offer their comments, questions, and opinion on the motion. And then when we were all done, we would take a vote. Now, I very explicitly said that at the beginning, and you raised absolutely no objection to that whatsoever at the time. In fact, you all agreed, everybody agreed that was a good approach in the affirmative, verbally. That did not go into the minutes, but if you listen to the recording, that's what happened. And then we went through the 3+ hours, you know, and my view of those 3+ hours, having listened to that meeting, is that a very constructive, you know, detailed debate was taking place on all the issues involved from both a legal point of view and a best practices point of view. There were compliments that went back and forth during that debate. I remember Jeff Driscoll, you know, complimenting Penny for her services during the time that she was as a resident services director, and there were others. And we went through and the votes were taken. And then at the end, very explicitly, as we were just trying to defer all the rest of the regular business, we got no regular business done at that meeting. So we were deciding to defer all of it to the January meeting, including, our executive director's performance evaluation, other important things. The Driscolls chimed in and said, "Oh, can we go?" While we approve the check warrants. And at which point I thanked the Driscolls for sticking with us for the 3+ hours, and all the other board members, including yourself, Ed, verbally thanked the Driscoll for their services that night. That's what you said. It did not go, we don't do transcripts in the minutes, but if you listen to the actual, recording, that's what you said. And that's what Penny said. And I said, and Janice said, and Eleanor said. We were all extremely grateful for the services they provided that night. So I really don't accept your, characterization that you voiced earlier this evening at all. I don't think that's what happened. I just want to know that, this information I've just relayed was captured in the November 18th minutes, 2021, and the December 16 minutes, 2021. And those minutes were on the agenda for the January 20th, 2022 board meeting. And those minutes were unanimously approved by the board, yourself included and Penny included. So what transpired at that meeting is described in the minutes. At that time, seems to me you were approving of. I've already made the point that it's a very extreme position to think that professionals invited to board meetings of any kind whatsoever are not doing it for compensation. They don't work for free. The last thing I guess almost last thing I want to bring up is you had sent in a motion for the January 20th meeting, which was on the agenda, to question the Driscoll's payment. And we did not get to that motion because we ran out of time, probably because we had like 2.5 board meetings worth of regular business to accomplish. And I had put now we were up to, I think, 12 motions that you and Penny had submitted. I put them at the end of the agenda just so that we could get some regular business done. But just as that board meeting was starting, just before or after, I had, about 5:30, I had received an email from, Jonathan Driscoll, which I forwarded to you at the time during the meeting. We never got to it, but I'm sure you've got it. And I forwarded it to you again prior to this meeting we're having tonight. And it was dated January 20th, 2022, just before that meeting at 5:34. And it says, Reg, I'm very concerned about the board's refusal to pay us for the time we spent providing legal counsel during the December meeting, which lasted over 3 hours. It gives me pause about continuing to do work for the NHA if it's unclear whether or not a firm will be compensated for their services. I agreed at the model to provide a model ED performance review at the board, but that was based on the obvious condition that we'd be compensated for our time. And I will not do so until I receive assurances that we in fact be compensated for those services. That was another thing where we were talking about your motion and proposal and Penny's to create an exit interview committee, but, board exit interview committee and interview employees. We spent about an hour discussing that. And at the end of that hour, Jonathan Driscoll and Jeff Driscoll from best practices point of view was pointing out there are different ways the board can monitor and exercise its oversight responsibilities and duty than what you were trying to do with the motion that evening. And you invited Jonathan Driscoll, in fact, to send the model that they were developing at that board meeting. You invited it, and the entire board, acting as a board, concurred with that. And that's what he's referring to. And as a result of that, I believe you and Penny, said that you would abstain from voting on that motion because you were looking forward to Jonathan Driscoll providing that model, that he'd been working on. And but he wasn't offering to do that for free. Trust me, I know you may not have experience in these things, and Eleanor, I mean you no disrespect, but I don't know any attorneys that work for free without being very explicit about it up front. And the default assumption is that they don't. And then, there are pro bono work that is provided, for indigent clients and so forth, but not to housing authorities or any other.
Can we stay on the point? We're getting pretty
I'm
far
not
away
finished.
from it.
So I'm going to finish reading this. This firm serves many clients, and I always make very conscious choices about with whom's time I prioritize and when. We have numerous other matters that we are currently engaged in with the NHA, including at least one that we appeared for in court, which would be entitled to request withdrawal from an account of a client that refusing to pay these services. No LHA in the 20+ year existence of this firm has ever refused to pay for legal services provided, and I would strongly encourage the board to avoid being the first. Signed, Jonathan Driscoll. So, we had, obviously strong, advocacy on his part that he should be paid for his services rendered. I want to go on to comment that the check signing function that we have by the commissioners, as we've gone over a number of times in prior meetings, is not for the purpose of substituting a commissioner's judgment for that of the executive director, the staff, and the bookkeeper. The purpose is to not double check or micromanage the executive director, or as some sort of extension of some interpretation of Chapter 121B, Section 5 of our duty as board members. It is a simple segregation of duties matter practice as defined by the AICPA. It's very
A point of order, please. Would you
No,
please
I am
stay with
finished.
the subject? You're not finished,
I
but you're
am on
getting
the
way
subject.
off the boat. You're out of order. Let's
I
stay
have
with the
finished.
motion.
I'm talking about the motion here. And it's a basic principle of internal risk management for the commissioner, to be in that sort of position. It's a form of internal control. The executive director and staff duty is to review them and approve those payments and to cut the checks. Just go simple here. And the commissioner's duty is to sign the checks.
Is to
That's our
authorize.
duty. The commissioner's duty is not to do a whole nother review again, based on zero information of what was going on, of all those checks. It's just to make sure that there isn't a huge check funding a vacation for an NHA staff member to go to Acapulco or something, completely untoward. It's the commissioner's duty to ask questions of the executive director, if they have any questions about the check register. That's why it's sent out and why it's provided in a board meeting. And the executive director can answer those questions. And you did not pose any questions in that, last Friday afternoon when you were avoiding the checks. You just wrote void, do not pay without a board approval on the check and the backup document here. And it's not the commissioner's duty to block timely payments to vendors. It is the executive director's decision, if you raise a question, if a board member raises a question, to say, oh, that's a good question, maybe I'll hold that check. I just want to be clear. Before you folks were on the board, I only remember 2 times this ever coming up. And one was a $10,000 plus water bill, and the executive director at the time held the check and said, "Oh, I'll look into that." And the other time was when there were multiple payments to a vendor called Carpet Carousel, and that may be violating Chapter 30B. And the executive director said, well, we obviously have incurred these services, so we have to pay.
Reg, you're
but I will
really
look
out of
into it.
order. Stay with the motion. The motion is to pay a check.
Ed, I will mute you if you keep interrupting me, okay?
Well, you're out of order.
I noted for the minutes, okay? It's not your ruling. I'm almost done, don't worry. So, this has happened before when you voided a check in October that had been approved by the board. That in that case, the issuance of that check was approved by the board. And when you and Penny received the checks for signing, just because I guess it was your turn or you were available, it was a check to GFN Painting for $6,500. You wrote void on it and returned it, even though that's not the procedure, and even though that had been, voted on by the entire board. I would go on and say, in this particular case, you had full knowledge of what happened in the services that were provided by Jonathan Driscoll, our legal counsel, and our best practices expert, Jeff Driscoll, who I would just point out, does all the, does 4 out of the 5 training modules for Mass NARO, and has been doing it for years. He is the go-to person, and certainly is a best practices expert. And, I would also point out that financially, Driscoll and Driscoll, our legal counsel, is one of our, largest services provider, providing multiple services every month, critical services. Worst case, if there was a mistake that you noted by raising a red flag, that or just a simple question of a mistake, there's always an opportunity to correct that mistake on the next monthly invoice, and not to hold up the entire bill for an entire month until our February 16th meeting. So, lastly, I would just say, I think commissioners going through and looking in detail at the general counsel's invoice is completely inappropriate for another reason, because that invoice and the backup on it has a great deal of detail with respect to individual tenant situations and disputes that may be taking place. And by law and regulation, we are obligated to keep that personal, information, the personal privacy of the tenant, limited to, NHA staff with a need to know. And I think there's a real risk that if we are overstepping, our roles and doing the micromanagement that as particularly as applied to these invoices, that we could open up ourselves as a board, as an agency, to a risk of lawsuit. So I really encourage strongly, for all those reasons, that the board, vote unanimously to adopt this resolution. Okay, you got the floor, Ed, if you want.
Well, let's try and get these in some kind of order. I can't, there are too many of them. You're saying we shouldn't have looked beyond the check itself at the detail because there was other information on the check run. And I had to look at it because I needed to know what the amount was for the Zoom meeting. So I had to look at it. You're contradicting yourself by saying that we're questioning these things, questioning a check after the fact. When you and I sat under the white tent in Framingham Common, and I complained about our detective coming to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you challenged me for voting for it on the warrant. And why was I bringing it up now? And I was bringing it to your attention because I thought it was highly unusual for a guy to be coming to work at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's what he signed in on, like 5 timesheets that I showed you.
So Ed, I'm just, you wanted to keep it on the topic here of.
I'm responding to the things that you said.
Okay, I didn't bring up anything about what you just mentioned.
I'm saying that I
I've
challenged
never met,
because you instructed me to challenge it.
I
Well,
didn't bring that
you're
up.
contradicting yourself.
Okay,
Let's see I reject your rebuttal completely. I am firmly convinced those 2 guys were brought in as an attack on me to try to shut me up because you didn't want those motions to pass. And in the minutes, you said there was a description of what went on. Well, the description was a debate took place. There was no detail of what they were saying. So that was a total misrepresentation. You acknowledged yourself that you're the one that approved Jeff Driscoll for coming in, even though Jonathan had been invited to discuss correcting his error. So it was a very long-winded description, rebuttal that I totally reject because I think you deliberately brought them in to shoot me down.
okay, well, you've made that allegation before and I won't respond to it in a different form. Okay. Does anybody else have any other comments? Go ahead, Penny.
You're muted, Penny. You're muted.
Yep, I see. You talked about how the Driscolls educated us. And yes, I did feel that that was what they were trying to do. But after that meeting, I educated myself further. I spoke with my lawyer who clarified the possibilities. I realized that I did not need to feel intimidated. Therefore, I regret that I abstained.
Any other comments from anybody else? Any other commissioner, that is. Janice, no more further comment?
No.
And Eleanor, how about yourself?
No, I may have something to say after we take the vote.
Okay. Okay. I certainly acknowledge that the minutes did not capture the entire debate, Ed. That is an accurate comment. They are, a very bare summary of what decisions we took, but not certainly, it's no way, shape, or form a transcript of the entire debate.
May I make a comment?
I was just going to finish my sentence and say we could, in fact, I've listened to the entire debate, or the entire meeting, let's put it that way. And we can certainly have a transcript made. That's not hard to do.
I was just going to make an observation that Robert's rules states that the minutes should not be a transcript. It should only be a description of what took place. So I think that Cheryl did the correct thing and is doing an exceedingly good job at doing it.
Great. And I would just say, the only reason I suggest that is because we seem to have radically different memories of what occurred at the December 16th meeting, but that's all. Any other comments? And then I'm going to bring it to a vote. Okay, so we have a motion before us to pay the Driscoll and Driscoll PC their $6,323.08. That we have a, we all have that document in front of us. They're basically their monthly invoice for December, January, and then we have a second from Eleanor. I'm going to do a roll call vote again. Ed, how do you vote?
No.
No. Janice, how do you vote?
Yes.
So the vote's yes to pay the invoice. Penny, how do you vote? I'm sorry, you're on.
You're
mute.
muted.
I'm trying hard not to interrupt. The answer is no.
Okay. Eleanor, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes, and I vote yes. So we will go ahead and pay that invoice. Does anybody want to have make any further comments before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Eleanor, you said you might want to say something. But go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel like we, as a board, we have a lot of really, we have this modernization project on our plate and a lot of, important so-called, day-to-day issues are more, which kind of denigrates it a bit, but, important, more routine issues and things that we would like to achieve. And I am just concerned about this board's ability to be able to come together and set strategic priorities, which is the role of the board, and to set measurements of those priorities that against which we evaluate Angie and by extension her team. And I am just concerned that, getting into sort of granular detail about many of these different issues that are not, that are not the sort of standard role of the board is going to severely hamper us as we try to move forward on these important matters. And I would also like to say that I've worked with a lot of nonprofit boards over the years and, perhaps not government agency boards, but I would assume that many of the same principles apply. And I have not personally experienced a board with the sort of dysfunction that this board seems to have. And nor have I, sort of secondhand heard of this type of dysfunction. And, I think that we need to all kind of coalesce around, what I think we all share similar goals for the housing authority and for the residents of the housing authority and wanting to be able to move forward on some of these big issues and also to be able to serve the residents on issues that are day to day, but as Janice indicated, ice removal and treatment. I mean, that makes a great deal of difference to people in their day-to-day lives. So I'm not meaning to denigrate day-to-day issues, but if we cannot all come to see eye to eye on what the role of the board is, we're not going to be able to move forward. And I don't think that, it is the board's role to oversee, and that does not mean, line item veto on particular expenses. It doesn't mean, constantly critiquing the executive director. Yes, it means having a positive relationship with the executive director. As a board, we're not always going to agree, with every single thing that the executive director does, or maybe there are certain ways that we think the executive director should improve. And that is totally legitimate. And I thought that our evaluation and discussion at the board meeting in January on that front was positive. And I also thought that we were going to maybe move forward on looking at some of these strategic priorities along the lines of what the Driscolls talked about in December, and that we, had expressed an interest as a board in moving forward on. So I'm glad that, we're going to be paying their bill, and maybe we can get some input from them, in crafting and helping us coalesce around strategic priorities for the board that we want to move forward.
Thank you, Eleanor. Yes, Ed.
Eleanor, thank you. That was very well said, and I totally agree with you. Penny has discussed with me the possibility of recommending mediation for the board. And she has had contact with a group from Harvard that are training law students in the art of, or the science of mediation. And there's no charge to it. And I would recommend, suggest, I'm not going to make a motion, but I would suggest that we take that seriously, consider that seriously as an avenue to accomplish what Eleanor just described. And I think that we are in such disarray. And again, this is not a motion, but a suggestion for consideration, that we put our modernization and reconstruction program on hold until we can straighten ourselves out a little bit better.
So let me suggest that you and, per our procedure that we adopted last time around, that you go ahead and work with Penny, but not any other commissioners, of course, because that will constitute a quorum of deliberation, but to tee up something for the agenda for the February meeting in writing, and, we'll put it on the agenda. Any other final comments before we let everybody go? Janice, you have anything?
Nope.
No. Penny? No. Okay, I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
Second by Mr. Scheidler. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Night all.
Good night.